Namaste everyone, I'm Cam. Welcome to thefoundationmethod.com. I'm the host of the program. On today's episode, we're diving a little bit more into mental health and mental hygiene, and I'm going to be talking about the 12 steps. What are the 12 steps? So it occurred to me in some of my videos, I talk about the 12 steps, my experience and recovery, and how it transformed my life. But I thought I'd put it together in a little video, a condensed version of what they are. And I'm going to speak today about a little definition. I'm going to read the steps and I'm going to explain them in a short version so that you can kind of get your head around what the actual 12 steps are. Where do they come from? A short history. Is there a program for me? How do I know if I need one? And then what do I do if I can't do God? Because you're going to hear God in the actual transcript, in the original AA transcript. And so I'm going to read some other variations of the 12-step program to you, some of them pretty humorous, especially Russell Brand's one. So stick around for that one. It's pretty funny. So start off with, what is the 12 steps? What is the definition of a 12-step program? So the 12 steps originated by Alcoholics Anonymous, or AA as it's affectionately known, is a spiritual foundation for personal recovery from the effects of alcoholism, both for the person using the alcohol as well as the friends and the family in Al-Anon, the family groups. The 12 steps are also used in recovery programs for addiction other than alcohol. Many members from 12-step recovery programs have found that these steps were not merely a way of overcoming addiction, but they became a guide towards a new way of life. So that's giving you an idea of where they came from. So the 12-step programs for addiction or for unmanageable things in your life, and I'll explore more about what that means a little later on. So program for living, you'll hear that when you go to some of these meetings. So you don't finish the steps, you work the steps progressively. And I remember when I first came in to 12-step meetings, and I thought, man, these guys have got this great healthy sobriety, freedom from the stuff that was causing them suffering, so why are they sticking around? And then I realized it's a program for living. So it really helps you simplify, and it's a spiritual program, or it could be a spiritual program unless you're atheist, and I'll talk more to that later on. But it helps you unpack and like if you think of it, if I've got disease in this cup right here, and then I turn up and I do a 12-step program, I pour the disease out and I wipe it clean by using my program of recovery. And then I fill my cup with daily behaviors and activities that keep me feeling full and keep me feeling well. And that's the continual working of the steps. And you'll find if you stop working the steps, or, you find that those things becoming unmanageable again, then it's just another process of wiping the cup out, emptying out the poison or the disease, and then continuing on with your life in a sober and well way. So generally, use a sponsor or a guide to work through the steps. That was really important for me. I know in the early days of AA, there were alcoholics recovering just using the book, the manual itself. And it can be done. I've met people that have done it that way. Although working with a sponsor can be a lot more valuable, a lot more potent, because they give you valuable perspective on things that you can't see. So there's generally a few blind spots that will come up and they'll help you get some perspective on that. So getting a good sponsor is a really important part of it. Connecting with a community for service or a fellowship while working the steps is really important as well. So if you can get to a group or a support group to work the steps, highly recommend it, because you'll hear wisdom and like salt to the earth, amazing wisdom about how they live and how they operate in life, where previously it was completely unmanageable and causing themselves and other people all around them extreme suffering. So yeah, get with the fellowship as well. And you'll see sometimes the circle with the triangle. So service, recovery, and a sobriety. So finding your sobriety, getting connected to a community, and then working the program of recovery. So it's a program of action. So I'm going to read the steps for you and give you a very short interpretation. So anyone who's an experienced 12-stepper out there, bear with me. It's just going to be a short introduction today. I will expand on this at a later date. So step 1, we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol. This is the AA 12 steps. and that our lives had become unmanageable. So step one is all about honesty. I'm admitting, I'm recognizing there's a problem, and that I have that sense of unmanageability when I start drinking, or I want to stop but I can't stop drinking. So there's some good indicators there for you. I'll speak more to that later on. Step two, I came to believe a power greater than ourselves that could restore us to sanity. So power greater than ourselves, I think here is the linchpin, because our best efforts got us to this point. And I remember being in a recovery, in a rehab, and I remember hearing this guy, and he was saying to me, and he was like, "Oh, I don't even know why we're here. This is ridiculous." And I was like, pretty sure it might be alcohol. Like, that's what the rehab's for. And he started going on, "Oh, it was my wife, it was my job, it was the pressure, it was the kids, everything but the problem." And that level of delusion is a general characteristic if anyone's got real unmanageable addictions that have sort of grown quite damaging by that stage. So your best power, your best efforts got you here, and then looking around at seeing other people who've got sobriety and wellness through using the program, you kind of start going, well, if they can do it, maybe I can do it, and maybe they know some stuff that I don't. So that's step two. Step three, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. So this is the first time we hear the word God introduced, and you'll find out why a little bit later when I talk about the history. When I got to this step and when I saw this, it kept me really sick and unwell and unrecovered for a couple of years, because I just couldn't do it. And in my experience, I found eventually, and because it says, God as we understood him. So not God as other people understood him, not God as the Buddhist guy over there, or the Christian guy, or the Hindu guy, but as I understand him. So I hadn't really gone into that. One of my favorite things, because my dad was an atheist, was to reason other people's religion and deconstruct it and look for the reasons that it wasn't valid, or find ways to unpack or demystify it, which was good, made me think critically. But also, when I got to this place, I realized I had a problem with the word God. So when I heard the word God, it reminded me of a vengeful Christian God, and I just couldn't connect with it. I just didn't understand that. But through working the steps and sticking around, I realized, it could be a group of drunks, could be a good orderly direction, didn't matter. It was of my understanding of it, and I started getting an understanding of what I would connect with as a higher power, the universe. I just call it life these days. Life flows through me. So step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. So this is where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. So at this point, we're asking the person doing the steps to, going through a list. Like if you're a shopkeeper, you're just doing a list, and in that list you're putting down your moral behavior of things that might have been a bit off, things that are well, and generally we break it down, if you're working traditionally through the steps, in like fears, resentments, negative sex behavior, and then wrongdoings, and you start processing it and looking at the patterns that start to emerge as you go through that. One of the interesting things that came up for me was a lot of fear. So I had lots and lots of fear going on. I thought I was quite a brave person, and I'd like to prove to myself that I was quite brave and capable in my life, but it seemed that underpinning it was an insane amount of fear that was coursing through my life, and that came from working step 4. Step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. So again, we're talking about God here. So in the presence of your higher power, or life, or the universe, and you'll see other variations of this later on, we share what we found with another person. So the important bit is that we're getting really honest with it. And honesty, if you're really, really honest with this part here, then recovery is coming for you and wellness is coming for you. And if you had an experience like I had, where I was as honest as I could be, and then there were new layers of stuff that I was starting to recognize later on, I just went through the steps again later and then cleared that stuff out. So don't worry, go for it as deep as you can, as honest as you can. And if you had, situations of blackouts, memory loss, the delusion's too strong, whatever, you can always work it again. That's not a problem. All right. Step 5. And admitting the exact nature of our wrongs. So really important to work that with somebody who you really trust, because you want to get very honest, and you also want to work that step. I worked that step with an older sober member who was my sponsor, who had the sort of sobriety that I was looking for. So when I was doing these steps, I was looking around a lot of people that had like a lot of mental disease, and I wanted somebody who had a level of wellness, humbleness and genuineness and safety about them. And then I really valued their perspective, and it really helped me get some good perspective on the exact nature of my wrongs, so that I could be a little bit more humble, knowing where the work in progress was needed, knowing where I was beating myself up too hard. So that's an important part of that step, working that with somebody that you really trust. Step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. You might hear in other religious followings and processes this handing over process. It's like, here is the good, the bad, the everything of me, and I hand it over in my hope that you will take these sufferings away, and I will recognize them in my daily life. And for me, some of the shortcomings, by the time I got to this stage, were completely removed from my character and from my psyche. So I look back and I kind of call that a God job. It was a power greater than me. It was something that I didn't do myself. I didn't go, right, I'm going to get rid of shortcomings. I made a decision at this point. I was entirely ready. And in step 7, humbly asked him to remove my shortcomings. I did that. And the experience for me is I had some of these things like people pleasing removed, something I'd suffered with or suffered from my whole life. And it was replaced with genuine self-care, self-love, and a nice boundary that if something was going to infringe on my self-worth, that it wasn't going to exist in my inner sanctum of my life, my friends, my family, etc. So that really helped me create genuine positive relationships, which was a nice change. So step 8, made a list of persons we'd harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. So this is, again, this is, I guess, kind of like the famous part of the 12-step program. People kind of go, my name is Earl, and different shows like that. He's written a list of all these people he'd done wrong to, and he's going around and he's making his amend to apologize for it. Sometimes when we get to this point, we'll start putting down the list and we're like, well, I'm never going to make amends to that person, or maybe make amends to that person, and I really want to make amends with this person. And if you listen to like the Joe and Charlie tapes, they'll which is a discourse about the 12 steps, they'll suggest you put it into 3 little categories there, so that then you kind of warm up to the ones that you're never going to make amends to by the time you start doing it. And then make it direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Now, it's important that we go through everything that we've gone through before we get to this step. Otherwise, you can barrel in there and run in there and confess all the sins that you've done with ex-lovers and go breaking their hearts and shattering their life on stuff that they had no idea about. And you've just created a scar in that person that they've got to carry for the rest of their life, and that's not conducive of healthy recovery. So the idea with this part is being mindful if that amends that you're doing is going to injure you. So if you're going to go there and make amends to somebody who literally is going to kill you, it might be suggested that you write a letter and go and burn it. Or the things that you did to that person that you're making amends on, for example, if you stole money from them, maybe you pay them back anonymously, just deposit it into their bank, or If you cause them physical harm, maybe you start donating money for survivors of physical abuse in a hospital. Do something to make a living amend if doing it face-to-face is going to be dangerous to you or to them. So that's something you want to work through with your sponsor as well. Step 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when we're wrong, promptly admitted it. So when I first did the steps, this was great because I was so conscious of what was going on at this stage that I would catch myself as I was going into the behavior. And then if I was upsetting somebody, I could make an amend. As I progressively got more busy in a new career and in my life, I found that this part sort of slipped. And then I had to go back and revisit the steps a little bit later. But if you work this as I do now these days, if I'm wrong, I can promptly admit it and then create that sense of peace and freedom in the moment rather than try and clean it up later on. So it's daily inventory, essentially. Sort through prayer and meditation. This is step 11. Sort through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for his knowledge and for his will and the power to carry it out. So that's fairly grandiose for people that aren't God savvy. But basically, being a practicing yogi, the prayer and the meditation wasn't too weird for me. And to demystify de-religious eyes, the idea, prayer is, consciously asking questions to the universe or to yourself or your higher self, or being cognizant of the questions you're asking. And meditation is being still and silent enough to hear the answers, and whether they're coming from you, your higher self, your intuition, or from a God of your understanding. That's up to you. And then 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice the principles in all our affairs. So this is great when you see it in action, when you see somebody who's had 30 years of sobriety, and they'll share in a 12-step meeting about how they use the principles and the traditions of the 12-step philosophy to navigate business affairs, and people being really pleasantly surprised. I remember somebody sharing, they were navigating a business deal with an old drinking buddy that they hadn't seen in over 20 years. And while navigating that business deal, the person took them aside and complimented them on how noble and righteous and well their decision-making was, and that they were literally planning to sever their business ties because of this person. And then they saw the change in thinking and psyche was so significant that they decided to merge and do the business. So yes, it can create significant change in your life beyond just being sober. So the history, 12-step began as a guiding principles, an organization called Alcoholics Anonymous, which are the 12 steps I just read you, or AA, a mutual self-help group that was founded in Akron, Ohio in the mid-1930s. The steps were developed by the group's founding members, Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob Smith. So you'll hear friends of Bill is a way that some people try and figure out whether you're a friend of AA. To alcoholics who had struggled with the disease for years before finding a solution in abstinence, fellowships with others, and to surrender to a higher power. In order to sustain the recovery, the founders of AA decided that they needed to share the lessons they'd learned with the other alcoholics, and then they wrote the AA Big Book, and then the 12-step as a program of recovery then started getting shared. I'll segue at this stage to say that some of the language in the AA Big Book, as well as the AA 12 steps, you'll notice it's quite sort of religious centric, or feels that way. Again, I just had a problem with the words. It wasn't the concept, is just I had a problem with the words. And secondly, some of it might sound a little bit old or grandiose, and that's because it's written, back in the day in the 30s up into the 50s, which I'll speak to now. So 12 steps developed in the early days of AA. As the group evolved, in 1953, article published The Grapevine, Bill Wilson identified 3 major sources of inspiration. So in the beginning, when they were sort of putting all the book together, they were pulling in research from some amazing psychologists, Jung, doctors that were working with recovering alcoholics, and then they speak here as the three major sources of inspiration. Number one, the Oxford Group, an evangelical movement in the 1920s and 30s that advocated honesty, selflessness, confession of sins. So there's that, sounds a bit Catholic, right? And making amends for harms done to others. Bill Wilson was a member of this before he founded AA and strongly influenced by its principles. So you can see some of the root concepts coming from that group. Number two, Dr. William Silkworth was one of the first medical professionals to embrace the idea of alcoholism as a disease. Silkworth believed that this addiction was characterized by mental obsession and an allergy to alcohol. Silkworth is the director of the Towns Hospital in New York City, where Bill W. went through his rehab. So I'm really glad that they bring that up because, recognizing alcoholism as the disease, if you ever work 12-step program, is really useful, because if somebody, had, let's say, allergy to bread, they're gluten intolerant, if they don't eat the bread, they're pretty well. But if you've got a severe allergy to gluten, if they're eating the bread, they get sick and they can actually end up dying. Doesn't matter if they're sober from eating bread for 10 years, and it doesn't mean that they don't like eating bread. It just means that it's no good for their actual physical body. And so that's good. I don't have any judgment towards anyone who drinks. It's just not for me, because it doesn't do good things to my body or to my mind. So that's the way that works. And number three, the other influence was the philosopher William James, author of the book Varieties of Religious Experience, believed that even the most hopeless of people could be transformed by a spiritual awakening. Bill W. read Varieties of Religious Experience while going through the detox from alcohol in 1934. James's philosophy became the source of the AA emphasis on surrender of a higher power. So hence all of the Christian overtones, hence all of the old sort of flowery language. Some people love it. I love it. I don't have any problem with it. Some people absolutely hate it and get triggered by it. And there's a whole lot of other texts that are spawned depending on what 12-step group you're going to go to. So is there a program for me? I'm going to give you a link in there to the Wikipedia, list of 12-step programs, because it's really great. It's awesome. It's comprehensive, and then it'll take you to definitions, and then you can search out those groups in your area. But just, a short part of the list. Of course, we've got the AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, Emotions Anonymous for recovery from mental illness and emotional illness, Gamblers Anonymous, Gamer Team for friends and family of problem gamblers and online gamers, Overeaters Anonymous, NA, Narcotics Anonymous, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, Codependents Anonymous, Workaholics Anonymous, and you'll start to see that, once you have a look at the full list, there's pretty much a fellowship for every ism. They say if you've got the isms or, the issues of that thing that is becoming unmanageable, then there's generally a 12-step program out there for you. And the good thing since COVID is there's tons of Zoom meetings as well. So if there's not one in your area, there's usually a website with a link to a Zoom meeting, which is super useful, or one of the dial-in phone conference meetings as well, so that you can get connected to hear the message of other people that go through the issues that you're going through. Fellowship is a big part of it, and going to meetings is a big part of it, so that you can hear the solutions in the simplicity of people's shares. How do I know if I need one? Well, firstly, if it's not a problem, it's not a problem. So, people see the change and the ideas and the transformation that goes through for people out there through some of these programs, and they go, oh, I'm not an alcoholic, oh, I don't have that problem. But they might have the isms of emotional unmanageability, or maybe they had parents that were alcoholics, and there's Al-Anon, Al-Anon for people who grew up affected by alcoholics, and there's a 12-step program in there that helps you process your stuff. And the other thing to note is that each 12-step program, based off the Alcoholics Anonymous 12 steps, and then took it in a very unique way depending on what the issue is. So you'll notice in AA, it's just abstinence. Don't drink. You put the plug in the jug, the miracle starts to happen. And that's been my experience. But for some other people, you'll find that it takes a little bit more structure So if it's Overeaters Anonymous, you can't survive without food. So you can't be abstinence from that. Same thing, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. Like, you can't live a happy, functional existence without a healthy, functioning connection to sex and love in your relationships. Otherwise, you get thrown into anorexia, which is, the big pendulum swing of that particular fellowship. So in that case, they'll talk about bottom line behaviors, and you develop them yourself, things I'm trying to stay away from, and top line behaviors, things that help you feel vibrant and uplifted. So each fellowship will have slightly different terminology, but they all base it off that original 12-step program concept, just to keep it really simple, and because it works. So 2 simple indicators to know if you need one of these programs for you. When you start doing that thing, you can't stop. And when you want to stop that thing, I can't. So I relate to that with cigarettes, like, oh, it's my last one, it feels terrible, and just find it difficult to stop. So, if there's a thing that's causing you suffering, even if it's thoughts or emotions, start journaling, get cognizant about it, and maybe there's a fellowship for you. Next part, does life feel unmanageable due to this thing? So, are you missing days off work? Are your personal relationships starting to break down? Is it causing negative effects in your home, in your job, other relationships, including the one with yourself? And that was really, I guess, one of the big indicators for me to get involved in this stuff, is because I realized my relationship with myself was suffering. I had all this spiritual education, great yoga training, had all these great resources and tools that would come undone around these certain things for me in my life, and that was alcohol. When I put it down, suddenly those things that I used as tools to kind of balance my life, they really worked, and I got some really great progression from it. So that was my experience. So addiction happens when someone compulsively engages in behavior such as drug taking, gambling, drinking, gaming, even when a side effect is bad, and when the side effect kicks in and people feel like they're losing control. People who have addictions usually can't stop doing the thing that they're addicted to without help and support. So that's, what I'm pointing to there is the fellowship of, whatever your 12-step program is. You might not want to hang out and go and drink coffee with them and go to parties with them. You might suddenly have an epiphany and have a whole new circle of friends and a whole new life unfold in front of you. And I've certainly seen that. So really, that part of the journey is up to you, but at least get involved enough to go to the meetings and be a part of it, create some service. The service element is so you get off yourself. When you take your focus off your own problems and help other people that are going through the same stuff as you, it can help restore some of that sense of self-worth as well. And that's just, good common sense. So what can I do if I can't do God? Now, my problem was, it was the word. It was the word that I had the problem with. It was the language that I had the problem with. It wasn't the concept. My concept of a vengeful, angry old Christian God throwing thunderbolts down at the poor little humans. That was the problem that I had. Because of the style of the language, I thought that's what it meant, but I was wrong. So I heard things like good orderly direction, which I love. Think of the flow of the river. Instead of me trying to swim upriver the whole time, I just turn with the flow and allow life to flow through me as well. One of the older sober members said group of drunks. I love that definition. This group of drunks will get me soda. I don't know about God. Some people think of it as the group or their sponsor. Some people think of it as the shares that come through other people. God speaks through other people, the wisdom that comes from other people. Some people just call it life. And one of my buddies just can't do the God word at all. So his sponsor got him to think of, he said, well, what do you want to get closer to? What do you feel like has unconditional love for you? And he said, well, my friends. And he goes, cool, we'll just call it friend. And he was like, great. So every time he heard the word God, he just replaced it with friend. So there are some other variations of the 12 steps, and they're worth noting for all of you people listening to me say that little last bit and going, no, it's a cult, it's a this, it's a that. And I'm like, yeah, I guess every sort of belief system that leans into spirituality might feel a bit that way if you're not into it. So no worries, we've got something for you. So the secular 12 steps not connected with religious or spiritual matters, but they still mention spiritual. So I guess, like, I like to refer to step 3. We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to these ideals as we understood them, right? So in this particular secular steps, they talk about these ideals rather than God or a high power, right? But at the end, it still says in 12, having had a spiritual renewal as a result of these steps. So it still mentions the word spiritual. So definition of secular says having nothing to do with religion or spirituality itself. So there's another version there. If you have a problem with religion, organized religion, as you know, I turned up with one. I don't have a problem with that stuff anymore. I've processed it, and I've seen lots of people who are living wonderful, functional examples of taking, you know, beautiful principles of religion into very open-minded lives. So yeah, I don't have that problem anymore. But if you do, then this version's for you. The next one is the practical steps. And the practical steps were from an atheist, Jeffrey Munn, Staying Sober. He wrote this book, Staying Sober Without God, in 2019. And there's no mention of religion or spiritual matters in this practical 12 steps. So let's go to step 3 again. Committed to a lifestyle of recovery, focusing only what we could control. So, you know, serenity prayer, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. This is kind of leaning into, you know, that particular prayer's wisdom. And I love the way that they've put that and weave that in there. And then if we have a look here at number 12, sought to retain our newfound recovery lifestyle by teaching it to those willing to learn by surrounding ourselves with healthy people. So community again. So we're talking about the community. And then in step 10 in this one, step 11, we started meditating. So it's not like they're negating meditation. And in step 10 here, practice daily self-reflection and continued making amends wherever necessary. So daily self-reflection, very similar to, akin to prayer, and daily inventory. So yeah, so that one's good if you're completely atheist and you just can't do any of the spiritual flowery shit. So let's take it to the next level. Russell Brand has this wonderful discourse on recovery, and a lot of 12-step meetings are using it because it's funny and it's layman stuff. If you have a problem with the F word, you can tune out now, and you can come and see me at thefoundationmethod.com. But if you don't, just to give you an idea, I'm going to put it up on the screen. But let's go to step 3. His version of step 3. Are you on your own going to unfuck yourself? So his step 1, 2, and 3 are hilarious. 1, are you a bit fucked? 2, could you not be fucked? And 3, are you on your own going to unfuck yourself? And then if we go to those later steps where they talk about, you know, spiritual concepts and behaviors, Step 10, watch out for fucked up thinking and behavior and be honest when it happens. Step 11, stay connected to your new perspective. And step 12, look at life less selfishly, be nice to everyone and help people if you can. So thanks, Russell. You've completely demystified, de-religiousized anything there. And if anyone follows Russell Brand, he's hilarious because he does have a very strong spiritual understanding, but he rewrit those 12 steps for people out there that just can't get their head around it. So, and you can use that, you know, and you can use that with your sponsor to unpack and get freedom from those things that you're struggling with, that make you feel like life is unmanageable or affect your life in really negative, painful, destructive ways. And this is a really simple program of action that you can do, and anyone can do. And I'm sure that there's a 12-step fellowship out there for you. If not, I'll help you start one. So thanks a lot for coming today, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. Nice, short and sweet. What are the 12 steps? And don't forget to come across to foundationmethod.com, where I take you through the 6 big problems and 6 high quality solutions that took me most of my life to figure out on my wellness journey, that will give you a beautiful foundation for understanding my programs and having a conversation with me so that I can mentor you and support you into wellness, so you can, practice the things you need to for yourself, so you can get the transformation that's going to work for you, and so that you can effectively live well. So thanks for coming along and listening today. Namaste, and I'll see you soon.